Hey everyone, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld. Thank you for joining me today. This is episode 122 of Hockey on the Spot, and I'm obviously doing a video. It's been a couple weeks, but if I'm doing a video now, you must know why. That's right. We have a couple of eliminations from the second round of the 2014 Stanley Cup playoffs. We have two to talk about. So I'll try to get through both of them as quickly as I can. So let's get right into it. Starting with right before that, just a couple of updates I wanted to touch upon before we started. Mostly just one update. I mean, obviously everybody already knows this, but a couple weeks ago, or a week ago, the Nashville Predators have announced a new coach for the first time in franchise history. Peter Laviolette, former head coach of the Carolina Hurricanes and the Philadelphia Flyers, will now be the new head coach of the Nashville Predators, and it is believed that their only head coach previously, Barry Trotz, will quite possibly get a job with the Washington Capitals. But we'll see. We'll see. There's going to be a lot of interest in coaches this coming season. It's going to be a very busy offseason coaching-wise. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be very interesting. But anyway, now with that out of the way, let's get into it. Starting with the series between the New York Rangers and the Pittsburgh Penguins. How about the New York Rangers? You guys, your fans, must be extremely excited. I know I am. I love the Rangers. They're one of my favorite teams. So major congratulations to the New York Rangers on a great job well done. It was a hard-fought series, and it was a very interesting series to say the least. They have defeated the Pittsburgh Penguins in 7 games. Game 7 obviously being last night, 2-1 being the final score. But the games looked like this. Game 1 went to the Rangers, 3-2 in overtime. Derek Brassard would score the overtime winner. That would be the only overtime game of that whole series. Every other game after that would end in regulation. The Rangers did win that game, but it really didn't feel like the Rangers really played that hard. So they had a 2-0 lead in that game. They blew that lead. Pens came back to tie it up. Brassard wins it in overtime. But it didn't really feel like they really played hard in that game. And then it showed throughout the next 3 games of the series, because after that, it was all Pittsburgh. The series obviously began in Pittsburgh. Game 2, so the Rangers picked up the Game 1 win in Pittsburgh. Game 2 in Pittsburgh, and Game 3 at Madison Square Garden. The Pens would come up with back-to-back shutouts, 3-0 in Game 2 and 2-0 in Game 3. Marc-Andre Fleury was absolutely phenomenal in those 2 games. He stood on his head, and Pittsburgh had everything going their way. Game 3, Sidney Crosby gets his only playoff goal of this year, and that would be the game winner. But rough postseason for him. We'll get into that later. Game 4 at the Garden. Rangers finally managed to break through after allowing 6 consecutive goals. Pens would get 1 before the Rangers would finally tie it up. But ultimately, that was another poor performance by the Rangers, and it was actually one of their worst games of the series. It was probably, from an overall play standpoint, their worst game of the series. They only generated 15 shots compared to Pittsburgh's 27. The Pens went on to win by a final score of 4-2. They held a 3-1 series lead. Rangers on the brink of elimination until all of a sudden, the day of game number 5, going back to Pittsburgh, a major tragedy happened. Martin St. Louis' mom would pass away. I believe it was from a heart attack. Major condolences to him, by the way. I really feel for you. I know people who know what it's like to lose a mom or a parent in general. She was 63 years old. Obviously, Marty 38, but it was a tragic loss indeed, and a very tragic loss indeed. But with a tragedy, sometimes with tragedy comes great things. Unfortunately, that is the case sometimes. But it generated a spark in the New York Rangers. It generated a spark in Marty St. Louis and the rest of the team as well. St. Louis really was not very noticeable in Game 5. It took him a game to really process the thoughts. He would play in Game 5, as would Chris Kreider, who actually returned in Game number 4. But he also he had a rough game in Game 4. But Game 5, Chris Kreider really made a difference. Marty St. Louis didn't play well, but the rest of the team would feel for him, they'd play behind him, and they wanted to win for him, and obviously they wanted to win for him and his mother. And with the motivation now set in their minds, we saw a completely different New York Rangers team throughout the next 3 games. Gabe only allowing 1 goal in each game and generating 10 total. Game 5 in Pittsburgh was just an absolute blowout. 5-1 win for the Rangers. The only time in the series in which either team had 5 goals. It was just a beautiful game for the Rangers. And all it took was a lucky bounce and a lucky goal and a highlight reel goal by Evgeny Malkin to get by them. Everything else was flawless on their part. Game 6, back to the Garden. Rangers still on the brink of elimination. Marty St. Louis finally comes alive, and he scores a goal even. And even though he didn't take a shot, it went off his leg, and it would be his goal. He would score with his family in the building, and he scored for his team. 3-1 win for the Rangers. Another great defensive effort. Once again, only one mistake made, allowing a goal by Brandon Sutter. So 3-1 win on home ice from the Rangers. Another game. Actually, Pittsburgh dominated that game, if I recall. Or no. Let's see exactly who dominated that game. It was Pittsburgh, actually. 37 shots to the Rangers, 29. The Rangers dominated Game 5. That's for sure. Ultimately, the Penguins had more shots in the whole series. I know that for sure. Game 3, the Rangers actually dominated Game 3, and by a long shot. Pittsburgh only had 15 shots. Fleury was just on his head that night. And then Game 4 was terrible for the Rangers. So now the Rangers, miraculously enough, come back to tie the series. Then Game 7, back in Pittsburgh. Great defensive effort by the New York Rangers, and it was the defensive effort that would win them this game. 2-1 final for the New York Rangers. Brian Boyle would get his second goal of the playoffs to make it 1-0 before UC Jokinen would get his 7th of the playoffs and 4th of the series to tie it up at 1. Both he and Derek Brassard were the leading goal scorers of that series with 4. And then in the second period on the power play, Brad Richards would score the game-winning goal, his 4th of the playoffs. There would be no further goal scoring from there, because after that it would pretty much be all Pittsburgh. 36 shots compared to the Rangers' 20. And Lundqvist made 35 saves. He was truly the star of that game. What a performance by the King. And with that, because of him and because of the Rangers' defensive efforts, the New York Rangers, for the first time ever, go on to defeat the Pittsburgh Penguins in a playoff series. They had never beaten the Penguins in a playoff series before. And also, this marked the first time in their 88-year history that they trailed a series 3-1 and erased a 3-1 series deficit to come back and win a series. They have never in their 88-year history done that before. So great. So for the New York Rangers franchise, making history could not have come at a better time against a great team in the Pittsburgh Penguins, who clearly is a better team and clearly have better players overall, but it's just the hard work and determination of the Rangers would get it done. So now we go into why the Rangers won and why the Penguins lost. So, first of all, why the New York Rangers would win this series? Well, I hate to say it, and I'm sure everyone's going to hate me for saying it too. The motivation from the death of Marty St. Louis' mom really sunk into this team, and it really showed them what they needed to do to win this series and come back. It showed them that they had to be on the same page. They had to communicate, and they had to play hard. They wanted to win for her, and they wanted to win for Marty St. Louis. St. Louis obviously wanted to win too. They knew they just had to get back to basics, and they just would work extremely hard, defensively especially, and Henrik Lundqvist just was the king. He lived up to his title, the king. And although the Rangers, all the shutouts in the series went to Pittsburgh, obviously it doesn't matter in the end when you win the series, when you win a series. But the Rangers, just as a defensive unit, they have one of the best defense corps, if not the best defense corps in the NHL. When you think of Ryan McDonough, Dan Girardi, Mark Stahl, those are the core three. And then you have the other guys on their blue line doing the little things. Anton Strawman, Kevin Klein, who they got in a trade with the Nashville Predators. Then they traded away Michael Del Zotto. And then even John Moore. John Moore, has contributed defensively in these playoffs. He's been a huge part for them in these playoffs. And then we also got to see Rafael Diaz in a couple games. He brings speed to their blue line whenever he's in the lineup. So the 7 players they have on their blue line, it's just a phenomenal core right there on defense when you think about it. It really is. It's a great defense core. So it was their defense core that won them that series, and it was also their goaltending that won them that series. Getting the big goal when needed. The Rangers, obviously, Game 7 was the game that exemplified that. The game was tied up at 1, and Brad Richards scores on the power play. And although the Rangers obviously tied the 2007 Anaheim Ducks record for longest power play drought, 36 power plays without a goal before finally breaking through in Game 5. The power play came alive at the right time, and Chris Kreider's return to the lineup really made a difference. Obviously, a rough Game 4 where he couldn't seem to find his positioning properly, but then the next 3 games he just exploded, and his presence in the lineup was another reason why they won the series. He really changed the momentum of that series when he got on his game. When Marty St. Louis got on his game as well. When they all got on their game, but especially Chris Kreider and Marty St. Louis. Those two got on their game at the right time, and it frustrated the Penguins. It really did. The third line for the New York Rangers, without question, has been the deadliest line for them in these playoffs, and one of the deadliest lines overall in the playoffs. You think of Derek Brassard, Matt Zuccarello, and Benoit Pouliot. Those 3 know how to communicate. Those 3 know how to get the puck to each other, get the dirty goal when needed. Matt Zuccarello, obviously the leading scorer for the Rangers at the end of the season, among all players that had been with the team all year. So that does not include Marty St. Louis. He obviously had more points overall, including his time with the Tampa Bay Lightning. But Zuccarello was their leading scorer overall. Derek Brassard, obviously, he has just been a huge addition from day one for the Rangers. He has just added a dimension to that team at center that they lost when they got rid of Artem Anisimov and Brandon Dubinsky. But Brassard has really solidified them in that position. It was just a great thing. Just a great thing to behold. And it's exciting when a team is able to play like that. It's fun to watch. Henrik Lundqvist being the king of Game 7s. The Rangers have not lost a Game 7 since 2009 against the Washington Capitals. And since the lockout, that was the only Game 7 that they had lost. After that, they have won every Game 7 they partook in. Against Game 7 against the Ottawa Senators in 2012. Game 7 against the Washington Capitals in 2012. Game 7 against the Washington Capitals again in 2013. Game 7, obviously, last series against the Philadelphia Flyers this year. And then now Game 7 here against the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Rangers defeating both Pennsylvania-based teams in 7 games. Just remarkable when you think about it. And then probably the final reason as to why the Rangers won, and maybe the most important reason of all, how well the Rangers were able to shut down the 2 big stars of the Pittsburgh Penguins, Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. Sidney Crosby was limited to just 1 goal throughout the whole series, and actually the whole playoffs as well. He has not had a good postseason. He did not have a good postseason this year. And when you think about it, and we'll talk more about this when we get into why the Penguins lost. Crosby, he did not register a point. The Rangers held him without a point in the last 3 games, and he only had 3 points in the whole series. A goal, obviously, in Game 3 and 2 assists in Game 4. He had way more points in the Columbus series. Rangers doing a great job shutting him down and frustrating him. He was absolutely frustrated throughout these whole playoffs. And then as for Evgeny Malkin played a bit better in this series, but not by much. He definitely had a better overall playoff than Crosby. Yeah, the Rangers really didn't shut him down as well as they did Crosby. Malkin had a lot more points, an assist in Game 1, a goal and an assist in Game 2. He was held without a point in Game 3, but then a goal and an assist in Game 4. Obviously, the highlight reel goal in Game 5, the Penguins' only goal of that game. He didn't have a point in Game 6, and then Game 7, 1 assist. So, Malkin actually wasn't shut down that well in this series, but Sidney Crosby definitely was. Holding Crosby to just the 3 points, that says a lot about your team and how well they can play defensively. But you think about all the big offensive stars on the Penguins, like James Neal is another one, actually. And James Neal, oh boy, another guy held to just 3 points in the series. A goal in Game 1, an assist in Game 2, and then an assist in Game 4. And that was it for him. How about Chris Kunitz? For Chris Kunitz, rough series for him as yeah, it was a rough series for him as well. Also, only 3 points, an assist in Game 2, an assist in Game 3, and a goal in Game 4. And that was it for Chris Kunitz. So, yeah, all the big stars for the Pittsburgh Penguins held off the board. Let's talk about their studs on defense. Chris Letang, an offensive defenseman who knows how to play against the Rangers. He had a pretty decent series, actually. A goal and 2 assists in game number 2, including the game winner. He kind of was the star of game 2. 3-point night. An assist in game 4 and an assist in game 5. So, 4 points. Not too bad, I guess. 4 points in 7 games. The real threat to the Rangers in this whole series was without a doubt UC Jokinen. He was just a goal-scoring machine throughout that whole entire series. And he had a huge playoff point streak going. Going back to the Columbus series, an assist in Game 1, a goal in Games 2, 3, and 4. He didn't have a point in Games 5 or 6, but then a goal in Game 7. So, great postseason for UC Jokinen overall. He was fantastic. So, the Rangers' ability to shut Crosby down really won it for him. And so, congratulations to the New York Rangers once again. They will go on to the Eastern Conference Finals for the second time in 3 years. And as they await their next opponent, they will play the winner of the Boston Bruins and Montreal Canadiens series. Their Game 7 will be held tonight. Be sure to check that one out, 7 o'clock Eastern Time on NBC Sports Network. Now, why the Pittsburgh Penguins lost this series? Obviously, one could say just pretty much the opposite reasons as to why the Rangers won, but not really. A lot of different things happen, where the Penguins obviously will really go back right into it. Sidney Crosby's inability to score in this series, again, held to just 3 points in the whole series. He's a goal and 2 assists. He did not have a multi, and that really came in a span of 2 games. And the 2 games being Games 3 and 4. He had the goal in Game 3, the game winner, and 2 assists in Game 4. And that was about it. In Games 1 and 2, and then 5 through 7, he was just absolutely shut down. He was frustrated. The Rangers got to his head. And we've never seen Crosby shut down like this. It's very rare to see a player of his talent and a guy who's most likely going to win the Hart Trophy, the only 100-point scorer in the NHL this year. It's rare to see a guy like that shut down so much in the playoffs, and the Rangers did just that. He did not explode throughout that whole series at all. Game 4, realistically, was probably his best game with the 2 assists. He's a guy who usually is known for putting up good numbers in the playoffs, actually. You think about all the numbers he had put up in the playoffs in his career. This was without a doubt the worst postseason of his career. That's still really young. He's only 26 years old. But now it's got to make you ask some questions, You got to now questions are going to come. Is Sidney Crosby's stock going to drop in the offseason? I don't think so. I think, one could assume maybe it was just a 1-year thing. It's really all going to depend on how he does next season. We know he'll be back with the Penguins next year. There's no way he's getting traded now. No way. Especially, we'll see how this has a toll on him in the coming season. We'll see how much of a toll this has on him in the coming season. If he can still be Sidney Crosby, that's going to be a big thing for the coming season for him. But for Sidney Crosby, obviously frustrating for him. Evgeny Malkin, he had a much better series, obviously. But and he'll definitely be back. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting. But for Crosby's inability to score in that series, that's really the major reason as to why the Rangers won that series. But you think about some other reasons as well. One reason I could definitely think of, injuries for the Penguins. Some key injuries that they had all season long that they really could not replace. Brooks Orpik missed the majority of the series, and actually the majority of the playoffs. And that really hurt the Penguins defensively. He's quite arguably their best shutdown defenseman. Their best shutdown defenseman at 32 years of age. I feel like with him being in the series, that would have made a major difference. He would have been out there knocking bodies down, and I think it would have been just much better for the Penguins. And then obviously, another injury that they've had all year long that they suffered earlier in the year. It was a season-ending injury to Pascal Dupuis, who had become one of their top performers, playing alongside Sidney Crosby. They'll have him back next year, and obviously it's something they'll look forward to. At least I think they'll have him back next year. He's not a free agent. No, he's not a free agent next year. So he actually's got a while before he's a free agent. But Pascal Dupuis, his loss, that was a huge loss for the Penguins, not having him throughout the playoffs. He would have added some consistency to the team, as he is a very consistent player, a really consistent two-way forward. And he's 34 years of age, so, really kind of, really hurts the Penguins. Because without him and without Brooks Orpik, offensively they struggled, and defensively they struggled. And then obviously another reason you always got to look back to the goaltender Marc-Andre Fleury, not being able to come up with the big save when he needed to, and that's something that's been a problem now the playoffs for a couple of years now, since winning the Cup. Since he won the Cup, his playoff consistency has not been there. But obviously, this year's postseason was probably the best postseason Fleury had in a while since winning the Cup. Obviously, since 2010, actually, because the Penguins went to the second round then. But the next couple of years, Fleury just did not perform well in the playoffs. 2011, 2012, and 2013. He obviously came up strong in the Columbus series when he had to, and with the exception of a bad game forward. In this series, I really feel like he really wasn't to blame for the loss of this series, but he still couldn't come up with the big save when he needed to. But at this time, it wasn't really his fault. And obviously, now a big question comes. Also, is there going to be a change made behind the bench in Pittsburgh? Is Dan Bilesma's Pittsburgh Penguins coaching career over? That's going to be interesting to find out in the offseason. A lot of people believe that he should have been fired last year. Now he faces being fired this year. What's going to happen to Ray Shero as well? We'll see. It's going to be a very interesting offseason for the Penguins. A lot of questions coming up as we dive back. As we dive back into another reason why the Penguins lost the series, their ineffectiveness on the power play. We talk about how the Rangers had that 36 power play drought for 36 straight power plays. Well, the Penguins' power play in this series wasn't much better. They were the best power play in the regular season. In this series, in this whole series, only one power play goal generated. Even the Rangers generated more power play goals in this series. The Rangers' penalty kill was just absolutely astounding. Hence another reason why they won, but also a reason why the Penguins lost. The Rangers' penalty killing really took a toll on the Pens, and they just couldn't score on the power play, and that really lost them this series. That was a huge killer for them. And those are pretty much the reasons why they lost this series. As we now look at their offseason coming up and some of the free agents that they have, their top performer from this past series, UC Jokinen. He is an unrestricted free agent. Wow, the Pittsburgh Penguins have a lot of unrestricted free agents for the coming year. UC Jokinen is an unrestricted free agent. Tanner Glass is an unrestricted free agent. Taylor Pyatt is an unrestricted free agent. Joe Vitale is an unrestricted free agent. Lee Stempniak is an unrestricted free agent. Chuck Kobasu is an unrestricted free agent. Chris Connor is an unrestricted free agent. And Marcel Gotch is an unrestricted free agent. That's up front. On the blue line, Brooks Orpik is an unrestricted free agent. Matt Niskanen is an unrestricted free agent. He is one of the bigger names for their unrestricted free agency. And Derek England is an unrestricted free agent. And then in goal, Thomas Bokun, who had not played all year, is an unrestricted free agent. And then they have a couple of prospects, Nicholas Drasnovich and Brendan Mickelson, who are unrestricted free agents as well. But of all those names, the biggest names for them in their unrestricted free agents: UC Jokinen up front. UC Jokinen, Tanner Glass, Lee Stempniak, Marcel Gotch, and on defense, Brooks Orpik and Matt Niskanen. Those are their big unrestricted free agents. A lot of those other guys will probably not be back. Joe Vitale as well, actually. He's a pretty decent size because he has become a stable fourth-line player in this league. One would think that Vitale will probably come back. He hasn't been in the league that long, so we'll see. Lee Stempniak, but these other guys, Chuck Kobasu, Chris Connor, they're probably gone. We know that. Taylor Pyatt, he's probably gone. But guys like UC Jokinen, what's going to happen to him? That would be a huge loss for the Penguins, I think, if he left. He's been a stable part of their offense. They, to me, need to sign him back, but the question is, will they? Who knows? Tanner Glass, a key fourth-line player. One of these fourth-liners will probably be out the door when you think of a guy like Bo Bennett coming up. He needs to make a stable, trying to make a stable position for himself in the lineup. Bo Bennett, by the way, he had a really bad game in Game 6. Another reason why they lost that game. He took so many penalties in that game. Taylor Pyatt, we know he's probably gone. Chuck Kobasu, Chris Connor, these guys are gone. But then you think of their two trade deadline acquisitions, Lee Stempniak and Marcel Gotch. I feel like they could bring Lee Stempniak back, especially now if you think about Dupuis coming back for next season. They have two players who play an identical style, and that would really help them a lot, especially defensively. So I think they should bring Stempniak back. I don't think he will come back, though. And then Marcel Gotch, he, to me, will probably definitely be gone. That's just my opinion. But we'll see. It's going to be interesting. It's really hard to tell with the Penguins and what they're going to do. And then you think of Brooks Orpik, Matt Niskanen, and Derek Engelland. One would think that they'll try to bring. I don't know about Brooks Orpik, but Matt Niskanen and Derek Engelland, one would think that they'll try to bring those guys back, especially Matt Niskanen. To me, Matt Niskanen is probably their biggest unrestricted free agent this year overall. He has just become a stable blue liner this year, and he has really proven himself. He's still very young, too. He's 26 years old, from the same draft class as Sidney Crosby. It's going to be interesting to see what happens to Matt Niskanen in the off season. I think he would be a huge benefit for a lot of teams that need some stability on the blue line. We will see what happens. It's going to be one interesting off season for Matt Niskanen for sure. Same goes for Brooks Orpik. He's 32 years old. What's going to happen to him? He would be a great addition for a team that needs a good shutdown defenseman who can play the game really rough, who can play a rough style. We'll see. It's going to be interesting. And then Derek Engelland, another rough defenseman as well. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting. And then, of course, Thomas Vokoun. He's 36 years old. He did not play at all this whole season. So Vokoun, to me, I don't think he'll be back with the Penguins, and I can honestly see this guy either retiring or going over to play in Europe. I don't see his future in the NHL being, I don't see him having much of an NHL future. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Now, we take a look at their restricted free agents real quick. Brandon Sutter is a restricted free agent. Jason Megna is a restricted free agent. Brian Gibbons is a restricted free agent, and Harry Zolnarchuk is a restricted free agent. That's up front. On the blue line, they only have one restricted free agent on the blue line, Simon Dupre, who is a player who really has just not gotten his shot in Pittsburgh. To me, this guy is ready to play. This guy is ready. He's more than ready to play with the big guys. He's proven to be an excellent 30th overall pick when in the lineup. But to me, I can see this guy going to arbitration and maybe going to unrestricted free agency. I think he'd be a great benefit for a team that really needs him. But we'll see. It's going to be interesting. Maybe the Penguins do sign him and finally give him his shot, especially if Matt Niskanen is going to leave, or even Brooks Orpik. I think one of these guys could be out the door regardless. One or two of these guys will probably be out the door, and guys like Robert Bortuzzo and Simon Dupre could finally get their chances. So, full chances. So we'll see. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be really interesting. And then, of course, Brian Gibbons, he's proven to be one of their better defensive players. I think he'll be back, definitely. They'll try to get him a contract. Jason Megna, he was good when in the lineup. They'll try to get him a contract. And Brandon Sutter, heck yeah, they're going to try to sign this guy. He's been a key third-line center for them. And he comes up huge when he has to. An excellent two-way forward Brandon Sutter has turned out to be. Harry Zolnarchuk, he'll probably be gone somehow. And then you look at their other restricted free agents, Zach Sill, another good defensive player when called upon, actually. Philip Samuelson, Bobby Farnham, Spencer Mahachik. Yeah, but none of these real important names that aren't important by any stretch. Yeah, I mean, but yeah, that's pretty much what the offseason is going to be looking like for the Penguins. They're going to have a real busy offseason, and the rumor is that everybody except Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin are touchable. Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin are the only untouchables on this team. There's going to be some major changes made in the offseason. It's going to be a real busy offseason for Ray Shero, if he's still there, and the Penguins. You know, what happens to Dan Bylsma, that's going to be key here. But anyway, with all that being said, congratulations to the New York Rangers. They defeat the Pittsburgh Penguins in 7 games, winning Game 7 by a final score of 2-1. The New York Rangers are going to the Eastern Conference Finals for the second time in a 3-year span, where they will await the winner of the Boston Bruins and Montreal Canadiens series. They will play the winner of that series. Game number 7 of that series will be tonight. So something to really look forward to. Okay, now we have another series to talk about. Another elimination series. The Chicago Blackhawks and the Minnesota Wild and the Chicago Blackhawks. Congratulations to the Chicago Blackhawks as they defeat the Minnesota Wild in 6 games. They won Game 6 in Minnesota last night by a final score of 2-1 in overtime. Patrick Kane scoring the overtime winner. As we overview the entire series, as we overview the entire series, real quick, the Chicago Blackhawks coming up big in 6 games. Games 1 and 2 in Chicago were both blowouts. 5-2 win in Game 1 and 4-1 win in Game 2. So the Hawks just dominated those 2 games. Then, when the series shifted to Minnesota, the Hawks got into a bit of trouble. The Wild dominate the 2 games of their own and come back to tie the series. 4-0 win in Game 3 for the Wild, and 4-2 win in Game 4. They would tie up the series. Game 5, back to Chicago. A 2-1 win for the Hawks in their home ice. They take a 3-2 series lead. And then Game 6, back in Minnesota, where the Wild have been so successful all postseason long. Game tied at 1, going into overtime. The only overtime game of the series. Patrick Kane shows those great hands of his, getting his 6th of the playoffs. That would be the overtime winner. And the Chicago Blackhawks, for the 2nd straight year, will advance, and the 3rd time, and actually, no, the 4th time in the last 6 years, will go to the Western Conference Finals. They will await the winner of the Anaheim Ducks and Los Angeles Kings series. They will play Game 6 tonight. We'll get more into that later. But congratulations to the Chicago Blackhawks as they will look to repeat as champions. So, why the Blackhawks won this series? Well, quite simply put, they barely lost anybody from last year's 2013 team. All that playoff experience of theirs, all that playoff experience of theirs really came through. And the Hawks have just been a dominant playoff team, especially at home. When you think of this lineup, again, Duncan Keith, Nicholas Chalmerson, Brent Seabrook, Nick Leddy, Patrick Sharp, Marcus Kruger, Sheldon Brookbank, Jonathan Taves, Brandon Saad, Christopher Stieg, he was part of the 2010 team, Michael Hanzus, Johnny Oduya, Ben Smith, Brian Bickle, Marion Hossa, and Patrick Kane. You look at all these guys, and then some of the guys that they did not have in their lineup, Michael Roosevelt, Andrew Shaw, Brandon Bolig. These are all guys part of the 13 team. The only guys in their lineup not part of any cup teams, Peter Regan and Joachim Nordstrom. So they just have a stacked lineup of experience. Whereas the Wild, they really don't have much in the way of cup experience when it really comes down to it. Zach Parise, obviously, he's been to the finals. Danny Heatley's been to the finals. But these guys did not come up strong. Keith Ballard has been to the finals. I believe he was part of that 2011 team. Actually, let me double check that. Yeah, he was part of that 2011 team. He's been there. But all these guys, they never won a cup. They never won a Stanley Cup. Matt Cook is the only player on their team, I believe, who has won a Stanley Cup. And yes, that is absolutely the case. The Wild, obviously, they did not have Matt Molson in game number 6. Matt Molson suffered an injury in game 3, I believe. Yeah, game 3. They missed him for the next 3 games. That was a big loss for them. Huge loss offensively. And you look at how well Corey Crawford played in those last 2 games. He was the star of those last 2 games for sure. He came up absolutely huge. But that could be a reason why the Hawks won. Obviously, again, the playoff success that they've had at home continues. The Chicago Blackhawks are undefeated on home ice in these playoffs, as were the Minnesota Wild going into Game 6. They have been so successful at home in these playoffs, but even again, the loss that they had in Game 6 was an overtime loss. There was just it was very unfortunate for the Wild, as they were a totally different team, a more experienced team from last year's team going into the series, which says a lot, tells you they're going to be a very good team going forward. They're going to be a very hard-working team going forward. They're not going to be a team to be messed with. They're going to be a playoff team for the next for years to come, and they're not going to be an easy team to go up against. But you think of the Hawks, and again, how well built they are. They're a well-rounded team, coached under one of the best coaches in the history of this game, Joel Quenneville. The Hawks are just absolutely stacked up and down the lineup. This is one of the depth heaviest teams in the league, and with all that playoff experience, you had to feel that the Hawks were going to get this far, and that they probably have a shot to go in and repeat as champions. That's now going to be the question in everyone's minds. They're now in the conference finals. Could they repeat as Stanley Cup champions? It's looking very good that they can. They're in the Western Conference Finals again, and it's going to be interesting to see. It's going to be very interesting to see. And, that's just one of those things, the Hawks, they have a lot more experience, and that's just the main reason why they won the series. And why the Wild lost this series, probably the ultimate reason why they lost this series. There's not really a lot of reasons for me to go over for this series, but one of the reasons why they lost was their inability to win on the road. They obviously got that road win in Game 7 against the Colorado Avalanche, but that came in overtime, and that was just really a lucky game on their part, They have not been an effective team on the road all postseason and all regular season long. They were not effective on the road by any means. They were one of the worst road teams in the league, but they erased that by being one of the best home teams in the league. And it was their home record, that their ability to win at home, that won it for them against the Avs. But they know next year they're going to have to be much better on the road to win. And also, when it really comes down to it, they really don't have a stable goaltender anymore. Ilya Bryzgalov obviously played the entire series, but Darcy Kemper, he's a guy who is earning his stripes in Minnesota. And then you think about Nicholas Backstrom and Josh Harding and how well Josh Harding played before having his season ended by multiple sclerosis. So we'll see, A lot of questions going into next season for the Minnesota Wild, but a lot of them, but the good news is most of them are positive. As we take a look at what the Wild have coming their way this offseason, as far as unrestricted free agents, Danny Heatley is an unrestricted free agent. Michael Rupp is an unrestricted free agent. Matt Molson is an unrestricted free agent. Cody McCormick is an unrestricted free agent. And Jake Dowell is an unrestricted free agent. That's up front. On defense, Clayton Stoner is an unrestricted free agent. Nate Prosser is an unrestricted free agent. And in goal, Ilya Bryzgalov is an unrestricted free agent. And John Curry is an unrestricted free agent. He came up a couple times. He came up a couple times this year. And then they have Brad Winchester in their prospect pool. He's an unrestricted free agent. He didn't play all year long. They got him in a trade with the Hawks. But really, they don't really have... They do have some big names, but one's got to think that a lot of these guys probably won't be back. I could see them maybe trying to bring Matt Molson back, especially if things with Thomas Vanek don't work out, as the anticipation is that Thomas Vanek will sign with the Minnesota Wild over the offseason. That's what a lot of people believe. But if that doesn't work out, I could see them looking into bringing Matt Molson back. We'll see. But Danny Heatley, he is definitely out the door. That has been the talk. He's 32 years of age, and he's not getting any better. In fact, he's only getting worse. He's not the player he used to be. That much we know. He is not going to be back in Minnesota next year. They've been looking to get him out of Minnesota for a couple of years now, and now he is finally gone. Mike Rupp, we know he's going to be gone. We'll see what happens with Cody McCormick. I think he was a really good defensive player for them coming in, and he played really well when he came in to the team this year. I feel like he's become a good defensive player for them. He's a very good defensive player. So we'll see what happens. And then Jake Dowell, this guy who really doesn't play at all anymore, he's gone. Clayton Stoner, one's got to figure he probably might be back because he's actually developed into one of their key defensemen. So I could see them trying to bring him back. And then Nate Prosser, I don't really know what's going to happen to him. I don't really know too much about him. But apparently, yeah, he played a lot this year. So maybe we'll see. Depends on what they have upcoming on their blue line. But then again, you look at the goaltending. John Curry, this guy's probably most definitely gone. And Ilya Bryzgalov, I don't think he's going to stay. He's 33 years of age, and if he does stay, it'll probably be like a one-year signing. It'll probably be signed to like a one-year deal or something like that. But they have Darcy Kemper coming up, so they have Darcy Kemper coming up, and he's going to be a very good goaltender for them in the future. So, going to be an interesting offseason in Minnesota. And then we look at their restricted free agents. Nino Niederreiter, they're definitely going to give him a nice contract over the offseason. He earned it. He definitely had a breakthrough year, finally looking like the player that many people thought he was going to be when he was taken 5th overall by the New York Islanders in 2010. Justin Fontaine, he played really well. I think he's going to get a contract. And then Jason Zucker, I think he'll be back. They have a lot of high hopes for this kid. They have high hopes for this kid. I can see him being back. and becoming a regular in their lineup. And then on defense, Jonathan Blum. One's got to figure that Blum's going to be gone, that he'll go to arbitration or something and he'll be gone. And then Darcy Kemper, they're going to bring him back, I have a feeling. So a lot of these restricted free agents will definitely be back. Steven Kampfer, Carson McMillan, Chris Foucault, Tyler Kuma. Tyler Kuma, we'll see what happens to him, whether he'll be back or not. Kyle Medved. And so these are really the only guys. We'll see. Who knows what's going to happen to all these guys in their system. But all these other mentioned names, I have a feeling they're gonna try to bring back most of these guys up. A lot of these guys, but then a lot of these guys will also be gone. So it's going to be a really interesting offseason, but we know one thing for sure, that Danny Heatley is the one player on this team that definitely is out the door. He's going to be he'll be a free agent name on the market. Again, not as big of a name as he used to be. But we'll see. It's going to be interesting to see what team goes after him, what team is going to go after him, if a team is going to go after him too, We'll see. It's going to be a really interesting offseason in Minnesota. But once again, congratulations to the Chicago Blackhawks as they defeat the Minnesota Wild in 6 games. They go to the Western Conference Finals for the 4th time in 6 years, as they will await the winner of the Los Angeles Kings and the Anaheim Ducks. Game 6 in LA tonight. If the Ducks win, they advance to play the Chicago Blackhawks. If the Kings win, then they will go to a Game 7, which would be held on Friday, May 16th. But one thing is for sure, Boston and Montreal, Game 7 in Boston. That series will end tonight, regardless of who wins. The Rangers will await that series. So again, the series for tonight, 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time on NBC Sports Network. Montreal Canadiens, Boston Bruins, Game 7 at the TD Garden. And then 9:30 p.m. Eastern, also on NBC Sports Network, the Anaheim Ducks and the Los Angeles Kings, Game 6 at the Staples Center. Again, if the Ducks win, they move on. If the Kings win, then Game 7 goes back to the Honda Center, and that game would be held Friday, May 16th. There will be no games Thursday. There will be no games tomorrow night. So it's going to be interesting, folks. A lot of interesting. The second round is nearing a close at long last, and we're getting to the point where the playoffs now get even more exciting. The conference finals series will begin very soon, but obviously we'll have another video. We know we're going to have another video up tomorrow at some point. Well, it won't be till later because I do have an obligation to make. So it won't be until later. That much is for sure. But again, a lot of exciting things coming our way. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That'll do it for this episode of Hockey on the Spot. Thank you guys for joining me. This has been Hockey on the Spot. Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld. I will see you guys again tomorrow. Thank you and have a great day.